Mexico City, May 23, 1974. The afternoon descended like a gauze over Avenida Insurgentes. The noise of blue buses, Beatles flashing headlights in a hurry, newspaper vendors advertising headlines about reforms and promises. In the window of a tailor shop, a radio whispered an old bolero. The volume rose and fell as the revolving door let in the street. Miguel Aranda, 38 years old, defense lawyer, walked with his light linen jacket open, tie loosened, his dark leather briefcase clutched to his chest. His eyes had that calmness of someone who has looked at crowded courtrooms and knew how to hear what the silence said when the words ended. He had a tiredness on his face that wasn't just justified by the cases. There was a tiredness in him of time, of life measured in stamped pages. The halls of the Palace of Justice smelled of damp paper and burnt coffee. The marble reflected footsteps, and each echo seemed official. Miguel stopped in front of a high window, watched the rain that threatened to fall and sighed. He had received a message. Prosecutor Ramirez, his old adversary, wanted to talk. Talking in that city was a word with multiple blades. Dr. Aranda. Ramirez appeared with his perfect mustaches, dark suit, shoes polished like obsidian. I heard that you were going to take over the defense of Arturo Salvatierra. The name could light a match in a basement. Salvatierra. Shell businessman. Godfather of contractors and restaurants. Suspected of links with smuggling and a network of men who, when they spoke, the city remained silent. Miguel lifted his chin. I heard wrong. I don't defend Salvatierra. Not yet, Ramirez corrected, with a wet smile. But he will need you, and I wish I didn't have to. The prosecutor left, leaving the scent of a delicate warning in the air. Miguel was alone, listening to the rain start. Thick, persistent. The payphone in the corner rang. He answered. The voice on the other end was feminine, low, like someone asking for help in a secret language. Dr. Aranda, they said that you are not afraid of things that have no name. Who speaks? Lucia Salvatierra. The silence between the two made noise. Miguel glanced sideways at the shadows of the corridor, as if the name he said could call someone unwanted. Adjusted the briefcase, changed the weight of the body. What do you need? Protective, doctor, and courage. Mine is running out. That night Miguel crossed the city. The San Angel neighborhood looked like a wet painting. The colonial houses, the flowery iron gates, the trees illuminated by the string of lanterns. A low house, with a well-kept garden and the scent of jacaranda trees, waited with its windows partially closed. The door opened before he knocked. Lucia welcomed him in a simple navy blue dress with three-quarter sleeves, her hair tied into a bun that exposed the back of her thin neck. She was effortlessly beautiful, like a discreet certainty. He had eyes that knew how to keep secrets, or that learned too soon. My husband, she said, without inviting him to sit down, doesn't know that I called him, and you can't know. The wall clock ticked every word. Miguel placed the folder on the wooden table. He saw the photographs on the sideboard. An elegant wedding, a man in a white suit smiling next to Lucia. An entire community of men and women in expensive attire, measured gestures, raised glasses. What's the matter, Mrs. Salvatierra? She took a while to respond, like someone choosing a safe bridge before crossing. A girl disappeared. Daughter of an accountant. My husband brought her into a negotiation, and now she disappeared. I saw her, doctor. She was terrified. I tried to protect as best I could. But what can I do living in this house? The rain got heavier, hitting the tiles like warning claps. Miguel noticed the almost invisible tremor in Lucia's hands. Something in that woman collided silently with the world around her. You are the only one who can get her out of where she is and take me away, he said finally, before it's too late. There was a double request there, and neither was simple. Miguel breathed slowly. He knew what he would face if he touched Salvatierra's web, the law of silence, as they called it, unwritten but feared, which protected businesses, families, and the secrets that sustained them. If I accept, he said, nothing left standing will be the same. Lucia stared at him, without blinking. So let what needs to fall be taken down. The first stone had been moved. The next day, Miguel returned to San Angel's house under a white sky. The driver had gone out to resolve matters, according to the maid, and Lucia was waiting for him in the garden. where the bougainvilleas climbed insolently over the wall. The light between the leaves cast liquid shadows across her eyes. "Thank you for coming back," she said. And the thank you seemed more than polite. It felt like the handing over of a fragment of yes. Miguel noticed details that did not serve the process, but served the heart. The thin wedding ring, the neck raised like that of someone who had learned not to lower their head, the smell of old paper coming from the open book on the table, a copy by Rosario Castellanos, words underlined with pencil. "I read this poem," he said, touching the book with the tips of his fingers. "Talk about wounds that don't show. Sometimes you can only survive by hiding them," she replied, closing the book as if hiding a wound. "But I've already hidden too much." The gardener passed by, pushing a cart, pretending not to hear. Birds made a noise that seemed exaggerated, as if to cover what the two were not saying. Love here began with what could not be touched. "I need the details," Miguel said, resuming the professional gesture that protected him from himself. "Who is the girl?" Marisol, 15 years old. His father, German Rivas, was an accountant for one of Arturo's partners. He discovered too many figures, too few figures, figures that don't match the clean world of invoices. He said what he shouldn't have. They disappeared with their daughter to keep him quiet. Lucia said, "They disappeared," in a low voice. The pain of others, in his mouth, had the weight of old memories. Miguel heard the sound of shoes on the kitchen floor. Someone stopped to listen. He abandoned the instinct to look over his shoulder and kept his eyes on hers. "Where do they keep her?" "In a house in Xochimilco. I heard Arturo on the phone yesterday. Take her to the flower house," he said. "I went there once years ago at a party. It's after the market, close to a lot of trajineras. And why did you call me, Lucia?" She took her time. It wasn't the right question, but the necessary one. "Because you look me in the eye and don't look away. And because I can't take it anymore." At the edge of the grass, a puddle reflected the sky. Miguel noticed his own face trembling in that shallow mirror, and next to it, Lucia's, two strangers linked by a responsibility that seemed greater than their strength, and therefore inevitable. "You know that if I touch this, I can't protect you from the consequences. Protect the girl." "Doctor," she said with firm sweetness, "I'll protect myself later." He nodded, and their fingertips touched almost by accident. The closed book on the table. The gesture was a short spark, enough to ignite something that didn't yet have a name, but already had a destiny. The flower house was less romantic than the name promised. High walls, peeling paint, thick glass windows. On the other side, the canals of Xochimilco slid like black ribbons, carrying flowers, fruits, and secrets. Miguel arrived at dusk, wearing a simple coat and unbranded hat, his briefcase replaced by a canvas bag with false documents and a broken thermometer, a banal object that served as an opener for the bathroom window. According to a tip he had heard from a former thief client, he waited for the two men at the door to change shifts. One of them smoked leisurely. The other turned a set of keys like someone with power. From a portable radio, a scratched bolero. Miguel bit his fear into silence, crossed the side alley, leaned against the wall. The brick was warm. "Nothing left standing will be the same," he repeated inside, like a prayer. When he forced the bathroom window, the thermometer clicked, and a piece of glass scratched his finger. Minimal blood, enough to remember he was alive. The house smelled of bleach and stagnant water. Miguel's steps were the opposite of the eloquence with which he usually spoke to the jury. Now each step needed to not exist. He found the room, simple lock, entered. Marisol was curled up on the mattress, eyes wide, breathing short. "Marisol," he said quietly, "I'm a friend of your mother's. I came to get her out of here. Are you going to hit me?" He asked without tears. "No, I'll take you home." She hesitated, looked down the hall, heard voices. Miguel took a white handkerchief from his pocket and tied it around her wrist, as if it were a bracelet. "It's our password," he said, almost smiling. "If they separate us, look for someone with a matching scarf. You will see." He placed another handkerchief around his own wrist. Marisol nodded. They left a creak of wood, a trapped scream, then steps. Miguel pushed the girl back into the room, pointed under the bed, raised his hand asking for silence. Two men crossed the hallway, laughing about something that didn't matter. One of them opened the door and entered without looking. Miguel, with his heart pounding, raised his arms slowly, ready for the impossible. "Let's go," the man said to the other, distracted. "The boss wants the numbers now." Door closed. Empty hallway. Miguel took the girl by the hand. They crossed the bathroom, the glass, the wall, the world. On the canal, a boatman wearing a cap pushed the trajinera with a long pole. "Are you the one with the scarf?" he asked, as if they were talking about the weather. "I am. Take us." The water smelled of mud and old flowers. Dusk turned the city into a photographic negative. "Marisol. Still changes, hold on." He held the handkerchief like someone holding a rosary. Miguel thought about Lucia, the garden, the book. He thought about Arturo, about business, about men. He thought about the law of silence, no decree, no signature, just well-educated fear. In the distance, fireworks erupted from some neighborhood party. It felt like irony. When they disembarked, a truck was waiting for them, Ramirez at the wheel. The world tightened. "Prosecutor," Miguel said, as if it were natural to find him on a corner in Xochimilco. "It must be a coincidence." "Nothing is a coincidence since yesterday," he replied. "Come in." Miguel placed Marisol in the back seat. The prosecutor's hand did not go to the gun. Went to the steering wheel, the engine roared. "I am the enemy, Aranda," he said, without looking. "But not the way you think. I've been trying to break this web for years. My best efforts failed. Alone, I can't do it. Maybe you can do what the law doesn't allow. What do you want? Break the law of silence and get out alive. I'll close the rest. But there is a price." "Which?" Ramirez quickly looked in the rearview mirror, saw the scarf on the lawyer's wrist, saw the scarf on the girl's wrist, understood more than he wanted. "Drop the case after saving her. Don't go after Lucia. If it is, I won't be able to hold it." In the back seat, Marisol clutched her handkerchief. Miguel responded with the calmness with which he sealed a destiny. "I don't promise." The next day, the headlines were about something else. In the city's basement, however, there were rumors. Riva's daughter had appeared at the door of the house, pale but alive. The accountant promised silence in exchange for his daughter's life. And it did. Fear fulfills better than contracts. At Arturo Salvatierra discovered the escape. In the early hours of the morning, the glass of whiskey remained untouched on the sideboard. He got up and, for the first time in years, didn't break anything. He limited himself to breathing. His eyes, between green and brown, had an old sadness, barely disguised by the perfection of the suit. He called two men. "Who was it?" "Aranda," said one without flourish. "Of course," replied Arturo, as if confirming the obvious. "And Lucia." "What do you know?" "Nothing, sir. Be careful with that word," he said, almost sweetly. Nothing tends to hide everything. At San Angel's house, Lucia pretended to be routine. He drank black coffee, reviewed the grocery list, reorganized the bookshelf. But my hands shook when I touched the books. The garden seemed to hear her breathing. In the afternoon, Miguel appeared, invited by an unsigned note left at the newsstand. "Today at 5. Bougainvilleas know how to keep secrets." "She's alive," he said, entering the garden with hope in the flesh. "He's with his parents." Lucia closed her eyes for a second. He opened them lighter, but no less alert. "Thank you, Doctor." "Miguel." "Thank you." Miguel. There were two syllables, and in them a world. Love, forbidden, dangerous, began to exist with a name. But the world was not naive. At the gate, a car stopped. Arturo came down with that air of a man who knows more than he says. He greeted his wife with a kiss on the cheek. Too long to be just a gesture. He saw Miguel in the garden and smiled politely. "Dr. Aranda, I didn't know him as a botanist. I'm learning." "Mr. Salvatierra." "Good. Learning keeps a man honest." 3 birds suddenly took flight. The gardener pretended not to hear. The silence thickened, like a theater curtain about to open. "Lucia, darling," said Arturo. "Go change your dress. We have a visitor at 8. She nodded. As he passed Miguel, he didn't look at him, but for a moment. Her perfume stuck to his collar. Arturo watched the scene with his small smile. "Doctor, life in our city demands loyalty. Sometimes the law doesn't understand this. You understand." "I understand lives," replied Miguel, tying his tie. and how you can't buy the silence of all of them. Arturo didn't get angry, he just straightened his fists in an elegant gesture. Still, he said quietly, you will have to choose. The 8 o'clock visit was with 2 men wearing matching hats, who spoke little and looked less. They brought papers and placed them on the table. Work contracts, licenses, bribes. Lucia served coffee in fine china cups. Miguel observed the signatures with the precision of a surgeon. In one of them, a name appeared as a ghost. German Rivas. The accountant had signed it. Fear, once again, had served its purpose. Interesting, said Miguel, in a neutral tone. Everything so organized. One of the men looked up, observing him. Miguel noticed a scar on his chin, straight old later. When he tried to remember the face, he would only remember the scar. The rest was too common. When they finished, Arturo walked with Miguel to the gate. The night smelled like wet earth, cars in the distance, barking, someone tuning a guitar. Arturo leaned against the column and crossed his arms. I know. Doctor, he said, as if announcing evidence. I know about the girl, I know about Xochimilco, and I know about Lucia. Miguel didn't respond. Arturo smiled, a toothless smile. I'm not a monster, he continued. My father beat my mother. Learned that pain teaches. Teach to be silent. Teach you how to negotiate. It teaches you not to. Loser, I had to build an empire with old boards and bent screws. When someone comes to pull out a board, everything creaks. He spoke tiredly, not threateningly, and that was what made speech more dangerous. Take what you need from my world to save your conscience, he said, finally. But give me back my house. Miguel thought about Lucia, the perfume stuck to his collar, the closed book, and he replied, sometimes to save a house, you have to tear it down. In the early hours of the morning, someone knocked on the door of Miguel's apartment. 2 men. The scar on his chin was there, gleaming in the hallway light. Dr. Aranda? Asked the scar as if it were a name. I don't receive visitors at this time. Then, consider yourself summoned. The punch was contained, calculated. Miguel collapsed against the wall, the taste of blood reminding him of vinegar. They carried him to a car and, blindfolded, drove him through streets that, from the noises he recognized by ear, the squeak of the tracks on the viaducto, the slow curve near the Monumento a la Revolucion, then the silence of a sparsely inhabited neighborhood. In a basement smelling of metal and dust, they sat him in a chair. Someone lit a cigarette. Arturo wasn't there. The scar. Yes, you may be brilliant in the courts, doctor, but here whoever listens to orders wins. And what is the order? To forget. The laugh was brief, then the sound of a lighter. There are things you don't understand, said the scar, bringing the cigarette closer to Miguel's wrist. The heat bit the skin. He bit down on the pain. Without screaming, Lucia is ours. The house. How's our contracts the city, almost ours, you, sir, are just a nuisance. And the girl? Miguel asked in a sunset voice. A whim that cost us time, replied the scar. But we learned. We won't make mistakes again. When they released him, close to dawn, Miguel staggered to the apartment. The first lights came on over the city. He washed his face, bandaged his burned wrist. The phone rang. Lucia, where are you? She asked, for the first time using the intimate you. Here, he replied, I am here, Arturo. You know we talked. I have to leave. Where to? Stop before me, she said enigmatically. Where did I exist without this deception? Lucia, don't come, not today. The call dropped. The silence became thick. Miguel looked at the white band on his wrist, at the bracelet he had invented for a girl, and which now marked his own skin. The price of disobedience, he thought, is to be remembered. Lucia disappeared from San Angel's house. The maid said she was visiting an aunt in Puebla. Arturo, discreetly, increased the number of security guards. The gardener watered too much, as if flooding the garden would drown out rumors. Miguel continued working. Small cases, lukewarm hearings, quick lunches in a cafe where the waitress called everyone Jefe. The world continued, as it always does, even when part of it falls. At night, he opened Rosario Castellanos and read verses as if asking permission from time. Without Lucia, the city lost light in some corners. Without Miguel, she lost courage. 4 months passed. The rain stopped. The heat grew. The radio talked about the economy, football, a soap opera that everyone was talking about. Below, the law of silence continued to distribute its invisible rules. An envelope arrived at Miguel's office, with no return address. Inside, a photograph. Lucia in profile, in an old courtyard with blue tiles, a white scarf on her left wrist. Behind, an arch with a dusty inscription. On the back, a phrase, "What love silences, the truth returns." He recognized the courtyard, Biblioteca Palafoxiana, in Puebla. He went there 2 days later, as if accepting a destiny. The interior of the library smelled of leather and century-old dust, tall bookshelves, windows with poem light. Lucia was at the table, as in the photo. She raised her face slowly, and their eyes met as if time was a short corridor. "You came," he said without a smile. "I came. I couldn't stay. Arturo watched me, and I—" She touched the scarf on her wrist. "I needed to remember who I was before I was his wife." Miguel sat in front. The sound of the students turning pages sounded like gentle rain. "And who were you?" "Someone who believed," he replied. "In a life with an open door, not locks. I forgot about that. And now I don't know, but I found names, dates, donations, letters from important people." She slid a folder to his side. "Arturo's world has deep roots. If we cut one, the trunk wobbles." Miguel opened it, read numbers, understood the architecture of power. He felt fear, good fear, which reveals the measure of his own courage. "If we do this, Lucia, there will be no going back." "There never was," she said at last, "since you entered my garden." Returning to Mexico City was like returning to the stage. The air seemed thicker. The footsteps, noisier. Miguel presented the Puebla documents to Prosecutor Ramirez. The prosecutor read with an eye for precision and judgments of faith. "It's enough to open the right doors," he said, "and to open the wrong ones." "I'm not backing down, neither do I," replied Ramirez. "But Aranda, there is one condition." "Other?" "Lucia. They will use her as a shield, do you understand?" Miguel understood. Love is a beautiful window, but also a target. Still, he went to meet Lucia in a small hotel in the historic center, where the elevator creaked like a memory. In the bedroom, old curtains filtered the light into streaks of dust. "We opened the case," he said, "with your material, with Marisol testifying without saying anyone's name, with Rivas confirming what he can. It's possible." She stood in front of the window. "Hands on the sill, they will come, I will stay." Lucia turned around. He walked towards him. What they did was hug. Long, silent, whole, like someone returning home after an earthquake. There was no rush. There was certainty. The kiss came late, and for that very reason. A kiss to give breath, not to take it. "Miguel, say it. If we win, what will be left of us?" "Us," he replied without much speech. "If we win, it will be us." The special hearing began on a September morning in 1974. The courtroom was full but quiet. Miguel entered with his light suit and a confidence that came not from the right result, but from the rectitude of the gesture. Ramirez was already in place, with his papers in rows. On the other side, Salvatierra's lawyers, impeccable, antiseptic, call from Marisol. The girl, now wearing a simple dress and the scarf kept in her purse, entered accompanied by her mother. He didn't say the names, he couldn't. He talked about fear, the windows, the water. The silence in the courtroom was an attentive animal. German Rivas confirmed the changes in figures, the connections, the pressures. He cried without tears, with that cry that dries up inside. The judge, a woman with a severe bun, listened with eyebrows that at times almost sagged. Miguel called the first big scam cross-donations, shell funds, licenses obtained through agreements at dawn. He displayed 2 old letters. He read, in a clear voice, only the essentials. "Your Excellency, the city is not on trial, we are. And what we have to ask is, does the law serve fear or life?" At the back of the room, Arturo appeared. No warning. Dark suit, light look. The rumor was contained by a gesture from the judge. He sat. Like a late king, Miguel called his last witness, Lucia. A leathery murmur scraped through the room. She walked to the center. Dressed in navy blue, hair tied up, the scarf on her wrist. Now, assumed. He swore to tell the truth. The silence tightened. "Mrs. Salvatierra," Miguel began, without looking at Arturo. "Did you know about the negotiations?" "I knew about the method," she replied. "How people kept quiet, but I didn't know names. Sometimes," his voice dropped, "you have to choose what to know so you don't go crazy." "And why are you talking now?" She looked at the audience. He didn't look for Arturo. He found Marisol and her mother. "Because fear educates," he said, "but courage liberates. And because," she breathed, finally looking at Arturo, "I loved the man my husband could have been today. I don't love what he chose to be." A sharp crack ran through the room, like when ancient wood gives way. Arturo didn't look away. His face showed nothing. Maybe that's why it showed everything. "The defense wishes to," interrupted one of Arturo's lawyers. "Silence," said the judge, with authority that didn't need to shout. It was then that Arturo stood up. He walked to the center without asking permission. The judge hesitated to detain him, and that second was enough for the story to change track. "Your Excellency," he said, "this court does not know the streets. They have their own decrees. I wrote them. I'm not ashamed. I did what was necessary to not lose." "Do you plead guilty?" asked the judge with a leap equal to courage. There was a silence that felt like a bridge over an abyss. "I declare myself capable," replied Arturo with sad irony, "of many things, including—" Shutting up now. A police officer at the door exchanged glances with another. Miguel noticed the quick calculation that was happening around him. If Arturo got out of there, nothing they had would be worth it. He took a simple step. "Your Excellency," he said, "I request preventive detention based on the evidence presented and the unequivocal risk of obstruction. The city needs to learn that no one is greater than the law, not even the law of silence." The judge pondered. He looked at Ramirez, who nodded with a ray of hope. He looked at Lucia, who was keeping her spine straight. He looked at the girl. "Had the scarf on her wrist, granted," he said, "immediate custody." The rumor grew. Now it was C. Arturo couldn't resist. He just closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, he looked for Lucia. He spoke without sound. "Forgive me." She bowed her head. Not in forgiveness, but in I respect what for an instant shone human in him. The way back to the chairs seemed shorter. Miguel sat down, his hands shaking. He looked at Lucia, and it was like breathing after a long tunnel. A few months later, the trial became a landmark cited in coffee conversations and in discreet law classes. There were no flashy headlines. There were small changes, more difficult licenses, contracts that required more than signature, people who decided not to remain silent. Arturo got enough years to feel the weight of his own empire crumbling from within. In prison, it was said, he started reading. Maybe he was looking for another way to not lose. Marisol returned to school. Germain found work away from the spreadsheets of fear. And in the garden of San Angel, the bougainvilleas continued to climb as if they knew nothing, as if they knew everything. Miguel and Lucia didn't need a party. They moved to an apartment with a balcony in Colonia Roma, where the wind moved the curtains and the afternoon light made patterns on the floor. On the wall, a photograph of the Xochimilco Canal at dusk. On the table, a copy of Rosario Castellanos, now open, with a page marked, "Courage is the House." Sometimes they walked through the Biblioteca Palafoxiana in silence, hand in hand. Other times, they would sit in the garden of San Angel, now theirs, and let the world forget about them for half an hour. "He knows," said Lucia one Sunday, looking at the sky through the leaves. "I was afraid that love would be a fault." "Love is a witness," replied Miguel. Placing his hand on her wrist, the scarf still appeared from time to time. On days of remembrance, he was the one who gave us our voice back. The city followed its symphony of horns and boleros, promises and reforms. And yet, there was a good silence on the porch of that house, the kind of silence that doesn't shut up. And when the wind passed through the bougainvillea, atoms of light danced over the scarf on Lucia's wrist, as if the entire city, for an instant, breathed without fear.